It sounds like the scope of the roofing rebate program has kind of expanded from when the first idea came up. Can you explain why?
Yeah, I must be careful because since my own house was damaged in the hailstorm, I can't really participate in the debate or have an opinion on the matter. But I can explain what it was, which is simply that they found that the $2,000 rebate probably wasn't enough to change people's behavior because they didn't really cover the difference in cost between the non-resilient roofing and the resilient roofing. So they increased the amount a little bit, and they increased the overall scope so that more people would be eligible.
And you can imagine there'd be some Calgarians who might say, why is the city doing this at all?
You know, it ends up costing homeowners a lot. It makes everybody's insurance go up. And so this is something that the city felt that if we make a small investment to help people do this, it'll keep costs down for everyone.
Talk about the city's financial position,
Mhm.
but after some strange things that happened with audit committee last week, we saw the $219 million.
Oh, I didn't know anything strange happened at audit committee, but okay.
Well, we all thought that the surplus was 98 for about a day, and then it turns out it's bigger. So, I think Calgarians see that number might say, well, the city's got tons of money, despite COVID. So, can you explain what happened with that?
Sure. The most important thing to understand is the reason that surplus exists is because there's two reasons. One is, for the first time ever, the federal government has actually provided some support to the cities for their operating funds in recognition of COVID. So in some ways, the surplus is a bit artificial because it reflects this federal funding. The second reason is because the city was very, very good about managing expenses last year. We got rid of most overtime, we didn't hire a bunch of seasonal workers, and sadly, we did have to lay a bunch of people off when we closed the recreation facilities. So in the end, we ended up okay. We would not have been okay without that federal funding. However, there's two issues here. Number one is that the federal fiscal year is not the same as our fiscal year. So we got all the money into 2020, but it's also meant to cover the first part of 2021. So part of that is already gone because it was covering our transit shortfalls and other things for the first part of 21. And there is a little bit left that we have been investing in COVID relief programs, something we call CoFlex, as well as in just making sure that we are ready for any other large pandemic expenses going forward. But you know what? That money also helped us with the investment that we announced yesterday in the downtown. And so all of that money is going to work on post-pandemic economic recovery.
So basically, the money that it was like $120 million of reserves went into the downtown plan yesterday, but a lot of that is money that was federal money.
Yeah, probably. I mean, don't quote me on this, but probably about half of it was a flow through from our 2020 surplus.
Because you don't know about government supports for this year, you basically have to bank some stuff and wait.
That's right. I was sort of expecting that in the federal budget they might announce an extension of that program for one more year. Because they did not, it's going to be important for us to keep some powder dry to cover any potential deficits this year. And there will be some because transit is still operating way below its capacity. Recreation facilities still have not opened. So there will definitely be a deficit this year, and we may need to keep some of this money to cover that.
The matter with Councillor Maglioka's expenses, is that now done and off the...
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating to me because Councillor Maglioka and Councillor Farkas have both chosen to ignore requests from the Integrity Commissioner for sanctions. And it bothers me that councillors can get away with that. If you've been sanctioned, you should take your lumps. So it's good that Councillor Maglioka has paid back the money, but he still hasn't apologized publicly.
Are you satisfied now that the changes have been made that would prevent these expenses from being submitted and paid out in the first place?
Yes, I think so. I think that we have put in a whole new systems of checks and balances in the councillor's office. Remember that my own expenses always followed a different process where the CFO had to approve them, so we've never had any problems. But we put in a new system for the councillors, which I think will be better.
And essentially that takes away the power from the head of the councillors committee?
That's right. And if there are problems with expenses that a councillor feels should be covered that have been rejected by the city, they come to me. They come to PFC. and we get to deal with those at Priorities and Finance Committee.
Are we still expecting a public report with more details about what changes exactly are being?
No, I don't think so. I think what you got today is that.
There's some confusion at the Calgary Fire Department right now about some firefighters say they received a letter saying they're eligible for the vaccine, but the province is actually saying no, they're not eligible yet. Could you talk about?
They are eligible. The province asked the city to define who is a medical first responder. And of course, because firefighters respond to 30,000 critical medical incidents per year, every firefighter is a medical first responder. So they are eligible and they should go ahead and book their vaccine.
But what if they get turned away at the vaccine clinic saying, no, you're actually not a part of phase 2?
They should point out that they have a letter showing that they are a medical first responder. I've heard that there are some pharmacies that are confused about this, so let me make it very clear to the pharmacies. Firefighters are eligible. I understand that at the AHS clinics, there has not been a problem.
And I guess, what was the advocacy like for to the province about this situation? You guys were talking about critical infrastructure. Oh yeah.
Thank you. I was wondering where that
Thank you,
was.
Alan.
The other side, Madeline.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you, man. I guess
I don't really want to answer that question, but I will.
how did the advocacy go?
Well, certainly I've been pushing hard for the province to understand that firefighters are healthcare workers. You know, if an audiologist is eligible, then a firefighter should be eligible. However, we're not done yet. I still continue to believe that Phase 2C, which is people in risky professions, should be vastly expanded to include folks like bus drivers and others who are at risk of exposure. There's a reason for this. Because the elderly are largely protected now, the rate of comorbidities, of severe outcomes, hospitalizations, and of death is more randomly distributed through the population. I've got a friend who's younger than me who's in the ICU right now. And so as a result, what we need to do, our first phase of vaccine was to prevent hospitalization and death. Now we have to, I believe, we have to focus on vaccines preventing exposure and infection, which means that it's logical for us to really focus on people who are at greater risk of infection. And that includes bus drivers, it includes grocery store clerks, of course it includes teachers, and the province needs to move forward on this, in my opinion. I would also add that we should be protecting critical infrastructure workers. So folks who work in the water plants, who work for Calgary Emergency Management, should also be prioritized now. And I think that we should do all of those folks before we go to otherwise healthy people under the age of 40.
That letter, sir, what has been provided to firefighters, is that an AHS letter? Is it a City of Calgary letter?
It's a City of Calgary letter.
Okay.
Because the City of Calgary was told by AHS that they will not define who is a medical first responder, and they leave it to the city to do that, so the city did.
Is it frustrating that firefighters were not included on the list?
It was a big mistake.
So, just to clarify, so the province asked the city to define who in the city workforce would be considered a medical first responder.
Correct.
So the city said, okay,
Here's our list.
Firefighters, and I don't know, there's others as well.
It's just firefighters.
And then it's a city letter that says firefighters are medical first responders, therefore eligible under 2C, and they take it with them to get their vaccine.
That's exactly right. And by and large, it's all the honor system. You know, I wasn't asked to prove my chronic condition, so nobody should be asking anyway. However, if they are asked, the firefighters do have that letter. And so I'll again say to all the pharmacies, you should be considering firefighters eligible under 2C.
Sorry, are other cities doing this too?
I don't know.
So it's just the city of Calgary?
No, I'm sure everyone's doing it, because I'm sure that letter went out to everybody. I just don't know. Okay?